My name is Michael Pauly. I'm the current chair of the admissions committee. Um, from my point of view, psychoanalysis as an intellectual endeavor and a clinical therapeutic endeavor holds so much tremendous growth potential for everybody who chooses to immerse themselves in it. And so along those lines, it's exciting to see so many people here that are interested in psychoanalytic thought and psychoanalysis as a practice. Um, this is going to be our open house. We have candidates here to present on the panel, which I'm deeply grateful for them being willing to represent their experience in our program. And after we hear from them for probably 25 or 30 minutes, we'd open it up for group questions to be answered and asked, obviously, with the hope that around 1:15 or 1:30 we can pivot towards getting refreshments and having individual conversation, socializing a bit, and getting to know one another. A couple points to make, I guess, before we get started. The first is that this is being recorded. So if anyone feels uncomfortable asking a question being recorded, they can always write it and pass it forward and someone can read it. The second is to make sure that you've signed in. We'll pass the sign. Is everybody signed in or do we need to pass it around? Everybody signed in? And then the third is for those of you that are online, Zan sent an updated packet information out this morning that has a little bit more corrected information to get it up to date in terms of the training expectations and personal analysis expectations. So very much hope that you find today rewarding and choose to spend more time with us in the near future. Thank you all.
So welcome everyone. I'm a candidate here, my fourth year. My name is Taryn Beard-Caleri, and I feel so moved to have all of you guys here, just because I remember being at my open house, so it feels very meaningful. We're going to be doing a panel presentation with candidates. We're going to have one more candidate join us with his son in a little bit too. But you guys have this really beautiful packet in front of you guys, and the ones who are online, it was just emailed to you guys. So in the packet, it kind of has a lot of details about the program, like we're a tripartite model, which means that there's 3 elements, which includes didactics, so our classes, which are every Friday from 12 to 5, with I think like 15-minute breaks in between. And then we have the second part, which is your own psychoanalytic practice. So everyone has to complete a minimum of 3 psychoanalytic cases. That include compilation as well. And then the third part is your own analysis. So everyone is required to do a minimum of 1 year of analysis. Most people do much more, and it kind of spans, throughout training and beyond. But that's the requirement. So there's more details in the packet about that. We also go over the application, and the application is due May 1st. And then it also has our new location, which next year we won't be here. We'll be in a new office, a new space, and it kind of gives you an overview of what that might look like. Yeah, so if you guys have already looked at that, that can maybe help you ask more questions. But we're going to get started with our portion of it. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a little bit and tell you a little bit about whatever they'd like regarding, who are they, what's their background, anything about SPSI that you guys feel is important. And then we'll move on to more specific questions. So I'll start with me. I have my doctorate in clinical psychology. I graduated in 2019 with my doctorate, and I started training like right after, because I was really excited to start training, and I thought it would be something that I would have to wait years to do, just based on, I don't know, my experience. I went to school in San Diego. So I was more like affiliated with the San Diego Psychoanalytic Institution. And I just got the impression that I'd have to wait, which I think was true. They had like a post-grad system, and their whole model is a little bit different. So I came to SPSI because I did my sort of APA internship in Washington, and I had a supervisor and our training director was psychodynamically inclined. So I was like really grateful for that because I had found out that that's what I was interested in throughout grad school, and throughout the internship, I felt like I had learned so much, but there was only so far that they could go with supervision. So then I emailed SPSI just like out of the blue. I didn't know anyone or anything, and asked if they had a sort of like graduate like program, not for training, but like if they took on graduates for like I'm not remembering the word, but they emailed me back. They said no, but they do training, and the director of the institute emailed me, and then we ended up meeting together, and she told me all about SPSI, and yeah, she told me all about SPSI, and I was kind of enamored because I was like, oh, like they're really interested, and like telling me about themselves. And then I ended up going to a SPSI event to kind of feel out like what's the feel in the room, because I've been to analytic spaces before and I always get so nervous. And I went, and yes, I was nervous, but I had a really great time and I asked questions. And for me, that really meant something, that I could ask questions and that other people were receptive and open. And then I ended up applying. So I'll stop there with my little story about how I got here. And I'll let you.
Okay. My name is Ross Farr. I am an LMHC, so a master's level clinician. This has been sort of a midlife career change for me. So I've been practicing since 2019. And I knew I was interested in analytic work. I had sort of stumbled into my own analysis back in the early 2000s. I think I was looking for a therapist and wasn't sure what I was looking for, but my therapist had a couch in her office. And I think I made sort of an awkward joke about a New Yorker cartoon or something like that, you know? And she said, do you want to try it? And I said, you mean now? And she said, sure. So 5 years later, I finished that analysis, but it kind of, that way of thinking sort of got into my DNA in a sense. So when I made a career change, I went to a school that wasn't necessarily analytically oriented. So I knew I wanted some more analytic education. I'm a second year, I'm in the second year cohort, so we're in the middle of our second year now. I have found that it's really a rich experience. Taryn mentioned the tripartite, which is sort of the traditional way training goes. So there's your own analysis, there's classes, and then there's being supervised in your own analytic cases. And it's really rich. The readings that we do kind of not only inform my own work with my own patients now, but also my own analysis, Think, oh my gosh, am I that narcissistic? And I get to talk about it with my ounce. I also really appreciate the cohort, and these are and the cohort ahead of us, which Taryn and Jesse, who just showed up, are in. Really a diverse group of folks in terms of practice and degree. That we have MDs, people right out of medical school, people who've been practicing for a while. People like me who are 2-year degree clinicians, MSWs. And so we bring a really rich depth of experience and sort of, different, within the analytic tradition, different theoretical perspectives. And it's really been great. I'm going to go ahead and pause here and let my cohort mate pick it up. But we are, interested in, if you have during the question and answer portion, any practical questions about what it's like, or questions about background or anything like that, I'm happy to answer.
My name is Eliza Christine, and I am a second year cohort member with Ross and Rye. And I should say there's 8 of us. Is that right?
I think so.
Yeah, there's 8 in our cohort. And it took me a long time to come to analytics training, but I've been in practice as an LMHC for about 10 years before coming to SPSI, or I guess now it's about 10 years. And I really had an affinity for psychoanalytic thinking from very early in my career, coming out of like literature, like reading and writing perspective around a psychoanalytic perspective on literature. And then went through a whole different career as a birth doula for quite a long time, and then found my way to being a therapist and really wanting to have like a longer, more emotionally rich experience and relationship with people that I was working with as a birth doula. And so becoming a therapist and working with people more long-term made sense. I started at that point, I was like, well, I probably need, if I want to be working with people in a long-range way, I should probably have an experience of long, like depth therapy myself. So I started in a therapy practice, or I started with somebody first, but not in an analysis. And that person really started to shape my thinking. And then when I went to graduate school, the same program that Ross went to actually at SPSI to get my 2-year master's, I just started from the get-go. I wanted to work psychoanalytically. So all the supervision and the internship that I sought out, everything from my career has been psychoanalytically oriented, and all my supervisors have been analysts. So I knew that it was like on the horizon. I was probably not going to avoid this kind of crux point in my career of like whether I was going to go into training and be an analyst myself. But I was ambivalent for a long time about whether I needed to do that because I was really fulfilled in my career as a therapist. And then there came a point maybe a few years ago where after the intensity of the pandemic and being at home, where I just started to feel like tired of clinical work, unmotivated, kind of just thinking maybe this isn't what I want to do. Maybe I want to focus more on writing, and I do need an academic or analytic home though. So I was trying to decide, like, am I going to go back to graduate school for something related to literature, or am I going to pursue analytic training? And all I ever wanted to do was read or write in psychoanalysis. So I thought, okay, really an institute that immersion is something that I'm just not going to be able to avoid if I want the career that I want. The development of my own mind, not necessarily what I was going to do to pay the bills. I thought I'll just let the clinical piece like simmer on the back burner. That'll sort itself out. And I would definitely say by year 2 this year, I just feel my clinical work has been totally revitalized. And it just seems like the clinical piece, the day-to-day work of going to my office, it feels different to me now. So I haven't lost anything of the richness of the reading and writing that I like to do. And I have so much more interest and like investment in the clinical piece and see those things really connected. So for me, it's been, revitalizing in that way. And the most surprising and like, I think important part of training for me thus far has been the cohort. And I think from the very beginning, like our first week, I was so interested in everybody's backgrounds and everybody's sort of unique disposition and thinking, a creative thinking and depth, that I was excited to learn from everybody. And now I really can see, like, I think particularly having had more case consult experience now with a blend of like 4th year and 2nd year candidates, so like 2 groups, 2 sections overlap in case consult, I can really see how my mind and clinical thinking has been influenced by the minds of the other cohort members. And that is not something that really shows up like in the paperwork of like, oh, this is how your mind will be changed by it. It's like we think about these tripartite model as being like, oh, you do all this like didactic and you have your cases with supervision and your analysis, but the cohort piece doesn't really show up in the papers, I don't think. But that's been hugely influential, a big part of my experience, and makes me excited to come, and has really spurred my investment in the community. Like the society aspect of the Institute has been influenced by like a positive cohort experience. So that's kind of my overview introduction.
I will go. I'm Rye. And I guess there are two threads. I'm kind of following suit here in terms of the question of what led me to here now. There are two threads, mainly personal and professional on the side, but the short answer is my own analysis. I graduated from, I'll backtrack a little bit. I graduated from a university or a school that was psychodynamically oriented, and that really influenced my thinking. And then I came here and I went into community mental health, and in community mental health I was kind of met with a whole range of patients that I was completely ill-equipped to work with, and I needed more training and professional holding. I was also really isolated in community mental health. There was like another person that was psychodynamically oriented. And so I wanted to be near people that thought about patients on like a deeper level. And I found SPSI, the 2-year program. So I did the 2-year program, and I found it extremely stimulating and organizing. I felt really inspired by instructors and the Institute as a whole. I felt really mentored. And similarly, like my practice, it wasn't a private practice, but just my practice of being was enlivened. And so then that kind of sustained me for a time. And then about 4 years of private practice and 2 kids later, I was craving more education, more training, more professional holding. And I had kind of found an analytic home at SPSI because of the way I was met and received. And so then I thought about analytic training. I've probably been to like several of these open houses, and it just like the third time I was like, okay, now's the time. And mostly because I wasn't panicking at the thought of terminating or ending my first analysis. And so that brings me to the more personal reason why I came here. So I moved across the country, 10 years ago from grad school, and like a lot of Jews, I found a therapist, and that therapist was an analyst. And so I gradually increased session frequency, and then I found my way. And it was a very profound experience that I was having. And I was kind of predisposed to analytic thought just because of my role in my family of origin. I was attuned to all this unconscious material that I couldn't make any sense of. And through analysis, I learned and was able to make sense of my experience, and I became to suffer less. And I was thinking about that phrasing, and I was like, I wouldn't go so far as to say that I became happy, but I just suffered less, which is like kind of a classic analytic. So then, so through my analysis, I wanted more professional holding, and it was an okay time. I didn't have 2 kids. I wasn't paying for 2 kids' preschools at the time that I started. I'm now just paying for 1 child's preschool. So that makes it a lot easier. Not that it's easy, but just more manageable. That's how I do
So I'm Jesse. I'm a current 4th year candidate. This is Matilo. And I was a theater major in undergrad, and I remember a rule I learned was that there are 3 things you never bring on stage with you unless you immediately want them to upstage you, which is a live animal, fire, or a baby. You may remember nothing of what I said, just that I had a baby on my lap. That's fine. So my dad is a psychoanalyst and a psychiatrist. My mom is an analytically oriented social worker therapist. Grew up on the East Coast, and so I just kind of like, analysis was never not a thing to me, I guess. And I remember thinking in middle school I wanted to be a therapist, and really liked having like long in-depth conversations with my friends who were going through hard times. And then I went away to college thinking I was going to like major in psychology and be pre-med and become a psychiatrist like my dad. And I hated it. And I majored in theater instead because I really liked people and stories and working with people more intimately. And then my older brother, who was also a professional like actor, theater artist, I saw kind of like the practicalities of that life and saw like how hard that is. And so I made my way back to school and did my pre-med requirements after graduating, and met my now spouse in Philadelphia, and then we moved out here 10 years ago and went to medical school, stayed here for psychiatry residency. And during residency, I knew, well, even during medical school, I knew my end goal was to become, kind of a more psychodynamic, psychoanalytically oriented psychiatrist. And there were times in medical school I felt like a complete fish out of water, just like, is anyone else here interested in the same things I am? But sometimes found really like-minded people. And then in residency here at UW, which is like a fairly I would say like a more cognitive behavioral oriented program, a more population health oriented program, but also found that they were quite open-minded to people who were more interested in psychodynamics and psychoanalysis. And I actually got the support of the program to give me basically residency credit to start this program. And I remember thinking whether or not I was going to do the 2-year or the 4-year, and ended up deciding like, well, I know I'm interested. And my program's going to support me, why not, dive into the 4-year? And so that's what I did during my 3rd year of residency. I'm now a year and a half out of residency in private practice, and in my 4th year as a candidate here. And I've just found the 2 trainings like really complementing one another, synergistic, and I feel like entering analytic training while I was training as a psychiatrist and now transitioning to private practice has just been like a really wonderful through line and like deepening of my work with people, and has, graduating out of residency kind of be a bit like, like leaving the nest, and, having ongoing training here after that process has been a nice way to just kind of like continue some aspect of training. Be in a learning atmosphere, be in a cohort, be learning all the time, and no regrets. And I just, I love the sense that I'm just going to be learning for the rest of my life. Like it's I hope to graduate someday, but like, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop reading and thinking and things. And it's helped me with, I think, all of my patients. And I've had 2 kids with my spouse during training. We had our first 3 months before starting classes, and then Matilo 11 months ago. The program was really supportive and flexible, and obviously our first was during the pandemic, and so everything was remote, but if I had her on my lap during class, no big deal. It was very welcome. And then when we had Matilo, I took a trimester off for parental leave, and the program was really supportive of that. And I'm just going to make up those classes with the 2nd year cohort next winter. to talk with people about that if that's a consideration.
Thank you, guys. So now we'll start with the question and answer. So if anyone has a question, start off with that.
I have. I guess I'll answer that question. I would say I feel like they're cousins. I don't know exactly how they relate so much as the 2-year program is, I think more like, well, you can speak to this too, but broader, and it's not as intensive or immersive, but so it's less involved in that it's just like Monday night classes every week. And it doesn't require you to be in your own personal analysis, nor does it require you to have control cases or patients that you're meeting with at least 3 times a week and getting consultations. So it's just kind of a toned down version.
Why don't I let other questions happen,
yeah.
and then maybe at the end I can say something about the 2-year program.
I have maybe a follow-up question to that, is just your perspective on doing the 2-year program and then later doing the 4-year, and if that worked well together, or if looking back you'd wish you'd just done the 4-year program initially.
My bank account wishes I just did, and my partner may, but I don't. I'm glad that I did the 2-year program. I wasn't like individually ready to go into analytic training, just in terms of my own personality and like maturity at that time. I think it would have been too much for me. So I really appreciated that 2-year program where I was in my individual analysis and just where I was in life. I really appreciated having the 2-year program and that kind of setting me up to be more available for the 4-year.
I didn't do the 2-year program at SPSI, but I had done a lot of fundamental type classes in psychoanalytic thinking before coming to SPSI, and it was really, really helpful for me. And I think I would feel like I was scrambling and trying to backfill some of the fundamentals, because the casework and the clinical material that we work with is intense and immediate in the 4-year program. And so it was helpful for me to have like some experience of being in classes where it was just like reading and trying to understand ideas. And so that I feel like that being kind of like part of my backbone as a candidate, and appreciate that having that. It frees me up to think in a different way and let myself go a little bit and not be so like anxious about like, do I understand everything in the readings, and am I missing anything? I feel more flexible about that and more relaxed.
Does Matthew have a question?
I don't think so, but I will just add about the, well, actually, I'm sure he has a million questions. But, I will add that because I started training during residency, which may apply to some folks here, I couldn't start cases until my 3rd year of analytic training, which I think has had some pros and cons. Like, it was nice to really just focus on the didactics and on my own analysis, but it did make me feel sort of like I was like a little behind, or like a little out of step with my cohort when people were talking about cases that they were starting in 1st and 2nd year. So that could be a factor on timing. But now that I've started cases, it feels like it's really enriched my learning. So I think I could have done the 2-year first and really benefited from that and come into the 4-year program, maybe a little bit more ready to just dive in the full tripartite model. But it's worked out this way as well.
Does Institute help us to find cases? Because I'm in practice, I'm a psychologist. I'm psychodynamically oriented, but I find it hard to convince people even 2 times a week, let alone come often. So I'm wondering if Institute arranged something in, finding cases. This is one. Also, another, the tripartite, the third leg, personal analysis. I looked around. I wanted to find ideally somebody who can take my insurance close to my home. So it is not the case. This is what I found out, which means this is an extra burden for 5 years, maybe $2,000 per month. I'm calculating in my head. Again, is the Institute willing to match people? I read there is no longer a referral service, but I really find hard to find a therapist willing to do analysis which is close to my home. I gave up the insurance, the hope, but I'm wondering if there is a help from the Institute involved. Okay.
Yeah, I would say the Institute is helpful.
Mhm.
I think in regards to getting cases, well, I think it says there's not a referral program. People do email SPSI asking for, therapy, asking for analysis. So we do keep track of that. So there's that, and then we also have a SPSI listserv. So when other people that are part of the SPSI community are looking for analysts to take on, patients whose, spouses or children or, other people who went to them asking for, analysis, they'll send that out in the listserv. I think also just being a part of the community is the help, because your instructors, your cohort mates, like everyone is a source for cases, is a source for, I think, also exploring, who you want to be your analyst. So my big answer would be like, yes, and that's like the huge benefit of being a part.
I think that one other thing worth mentioning in terms of the development of one's clinical panel is that I remember it being said to me that analytic cases aren't found, they're created. And so in your first year and into the beginnings of the second year, you are exposed in terms of working through the opening phase with a person, thinking more dynamically and conceptually in terms of suitability or readiness, and trying to, with your consultant, think about the ways in which you can engage a person that may benefit tremendously from more depth work. And the idea would be that the actual didactic experience also helps in terms of having that conversation with the people that are in your practice that you feel you can work with more closely in terms of how to formulate that in a more effective, hopefully inspiring way such that people say yes. And you can grow your analytic experience that way as well, in addition to the communal-based referral components.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that came up in my head too. I remember, like, during my first year, and maybe even a little bit of the second year, I was like, I don't know, like, how I'm gonna have cases. Like, I was in private practice, but the idea of like talking to people about analysis, like, I want you to come here 3 to 4, 5 times a week and pay me, and this is why it's gonna be helpful. I wasn't confident enough in that. And I think, going through classes, learning more about analysis, doing my own analysis helped me to actually like feel the value of it, you know, because I shared, like, I was already interested in analysis, but to actually be immersed in it helped me to be able to talk about it better. And now I only have, you know, I have one case going right now. I just had a baby, so I spent most of my time with her. But I feel really confident that when I open up my hours, I will have more cases. I can look at the, you know, patients I have right now and I can think, this is how we can talk about it. But that was, I think that's a really good question and something that comes up, at least in my cohort, for a lot of us, like, oh, like, how are we going to get these cases?
Well, I've been toying with the idea. I'm on the faculty, but I wanted to say one thing that I guess we don't really cover. There's so much that the faculty gets from teaching. I think that you really aren't so aware of that. But every time you go to a class and you go over certain ideas or clinical material, it's really a wonderful experience for the faculty, for the people who are teaching. And that's an experience that's really created by the candidates. That is not, you know, the faculty going in and saying, this is what we're going to do. It's not like that at all.
Yeah, the classes are, I think, really co-created too. The instructors want feedback before starting class, you know, during class, like it's very much like a collaborative learning.
Was part of your question on how to find your own analyst, training analyst? Yeah, I think there are analysts associated with SPSI who are specially qualified to be analysts for candidates. So that's, and we're really encouraged to find one of them.
Yeah, I went through the list. Actually, my initial thing is, let me find somebody who takes my insurance. And over that list, I found 4 people, 2 MDs, 2 not. And I called, you know, one of them said I'm too old to take an analytical patient. The other is saying I'm going to drop my insurance soon. So that's why I gave up the insurance idea. So I'm calculating numbers in my head. And I thought, you know, you better, you know, institute kind of help us find a good match, matching our desires and financial concerns whatsoever. Maybe cohort can help each other is what I'm getting from the listserv.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think that there aren't a ton of analysts. Not a lot of people sign up for this.
Right.
But I do think being a candidate in the institute and having the instructors available to you to ask and having the cohort available to you to ask kind of broadens the scope of people you're connected to. And through that, I think it becomes easier. I also think there's, you know, the training analysts and other analysts are dedicated to being available to candidates because they know that's part of the training. Yeah, Julie.
I think the other thing I want to add that's not on the, I'm on faculty and Julie, that's not on the website and it's a fairly new development in the field at the national level and then really is just growing at our local level, is that there's a new system to increase the number of people who do analysis of candidates. And there's this system, there's a lot of analysts in the Seattle area who may not be on the SPSI list, but who are also going to be qualified as people who can be an analyst for a candidate. So there's actually a lot more avenues, I think, than the website currently reflects, and it's emerging as we speak. It's a very new, very exciting development.
And I'll add on to that one of the things that we're going to intentionally do with the incoming group or with people considering whether or not they'd like to apply and take this on is to be more intentional in terms of having discussions about how does one go about choosing the consultant, how does one go about choosing their own personal analyst, and to have faculty members and or a kind of group designated towards helping people think through these so you don't feel so alone in terms of making a decision and
make sure that you're making the decision with as much information as possible.
I have another question. If we were to be out of town for whatever the reason, for an extended couple of weeks, 1 month, is it possible to connect remotely now to the classes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in Jessie and I's cohort, April, she is in Portland, so she drives down here like a couple times in trimester, but she remotes in, and I remote in, even though I live really close, just because I'm watching my baby all day. So it's
What I have found as a faculty member and coming from a time when there weren't remote, we didn't even have remote, but it really enriches it when you can come in. And that people tend to really want to come in because they get closer to each other. And I think that the cohort that's graduated that sort of started alone and all didn't get to meet each other in person for a while, you know, really felt that lack in terms of the camaraderie and the cohesiveness.
But at least we have an option when we're out of town.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just hearing financial anxiety, which is wonderful. I'm just curious if you've seen people in the program that have had to take a pause for financial and return when circumstances have changed.
Our cohort started bigger. Our cohort started at 12, and now we're 7. So there was some attrition, and some folks may come back. I think that's very much sort of a question I think some people intend to. I don't personally know for how many of them financial was the primary driving factor. I think it was a factor for a number of them, and I think may have been a primary factor for one of them. Not because the cost of training is so high, but the opportunity cost of training is so high. Yeah, the lost income while you're in class, while you're in your own analysis. Yeah, I mean, it's significant. You know, it's definitely a factor deciding, and you know, it doesn't go on forever. and
But
and I
people
think
have the opportunity to come back if they run into a difficult.
Certainly, yeah.
and also, so financial, that is a piece, like we have to pay for classes, for our own analysis, for our consultants. And that's definitely been something that I've felt and thought about. And for me, it has been a concern, but it's also been alleviated because the collective grant committee, like that's a committee that's a part of SPSI, and they can give grants to candidates for, you know, doing low cost analysis cases or for training purposes. And so that's something that I have that has been tremendously helpful because I'm not working as much. So that's an option. There's also loans through the American Psychoanalytic Association as well. So there are options to kind of help with the financial costs.
So that, you know, each of those 3 parts has costs associated, as we're talking about. So there's the tuition, and then there's your own analysis, and there's paying consultants. The thing about the and you need a certain amount of these practice cases. They're called control cases. It's kind of a strange term, but that's what we call them sometimes. The control cases, you need to sort of, you're kind of encouraged to get going on those, but my understanding, and I've sort of taken a slightly slow approach to that, partly so I can sort of save money with consulting fees. So if it takes me a little longer than the 4 years of didactic work to get to make it through all of my control case requirements, that's going to have to be okay. And I think other people have, similar, take a little bit longer to sort of finish their control case. And that helps spread out some of the cost, and it doesn't feel like such a big outlay kind of all at once.
I want to add to this. My name is Matt, and I'm also on the faculty here. Sorry I'm late. Hope to talk to as many of you as I can. I think the point that Ross just made is a really good one. That there's a lot of inherent costs that we just can't ignore about training. People look at the calendar of classes and they see that it's 4 years, and you sort of do the math. In my experience, it's pretty rare that people finish training in 4 years. I think the average time to graduate is actually closer to 6 or 7. And that's just because we encourage immersion in cases. And I think the reality for a lot of people is that it is necessary to spread out some of the costs. It's possible to graduate in 4 years, and that's fine. But Jesse's point that this is an introduction to a lifetime of learning is really important. There's no there's no inherent reason I can think of why a person should rush to graduate in 4 years. It's about getting the experience and the exposure, gaining confidence, building a community, and that takes time. There's a flip side to the financial question that I want to speak to, and I'm never sure how this lands, but when you go through analytic training, and I did the 2-year and the 4-year program, when you go through analytic training, you do become more confident, hopefully, and skilled as a therapist. And that means that you can practice more confidently. What I'm getting at is that I'm comfortable charging what I think I believe I should earn as a therapist. When I started training, I think I was undercharging. I, would occasionally lose clients. I didn't know why. So I think there's a level, frankly, of mastery that comes with training that gives you a little bit of financial freedom. You have to pay to get there, though.
Yeah, they kind of, I think that the cases and the consultation fees, in my mind, I have them sort of matched together. So I gave up time in order to make more money, and made some other things that I think are related to just like developing like an analytic identity and a confidence. I raised my rates. I got off an insurance panel that I didn't want to be on in order to get paid more. I switched how I was getting paid, so I wasn't paying as even just a fraction of fees to how I was getting the income to like a third party, whatever. And then I gave up. I used to like have my Fridays off, and now I work Friday mornings and I start earlier than I ever have before, and then I come here. So I have to put in time on the weekends too. I don't always get paid for my weekend time, but I do have to do something to run my business and keep up with work related to SPSI on the weekends. I really can carve out time to, I can plan ahead to take time off, but I am working more. And then when I think about the cases that I'm paying for consultation for, they come more frequently. So they were coming at like once or twice a week. And then, I have two cases right now that I see 3 to 4 times a week each, and then and 2 consultation visits a week. So those folks who are my control cases, they were coming twice a week, and then when they increased, I was like, oh great, now I have this extra hour that then I pay my consultant for that. So in my mind, it kind of works together. It's not that they cancel each other out because I'm getting something from that, but it does that's how in my mind I've kind of made it affordable to do that. And I sort of see myself having more flexibility and more time and more income when I'm done with SPSI, but I've changed to make it work.
Well, I recognize, this is work you can do till the end of your life. It's deep. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Questions? Yeah, one that dovetails on another. Regarding all this financial stuff, is there also any saying on how to do practice? Like you said, you just mentioned changes in folks maybe just within the cohort or in faculty that how you charge? Eliza is a great resource for you.
Well, I think I would say that a lot of my perspective on money has probably been shaped by me being an analysis and me grappling with like how I think about money and what my values are and how to live in a capitalist society when that doesn't feel like it matches with my values. So there's that piece, and then I've just decided like I need to be a person who knows money. So I probably focus on it. Like I probably work on money every day to some degree. It doesn't feel like I'm just trying to grab money. But it just feels like an area of like, oh, I'd like to be competent in this. It's become maybe like an interest of mine. I pay attention to money. I listen to podcasts. I think about that. So, and it is part of my analytic identity, and that it gives me a lot of freedom to be an independent person for the things I want, because it's hard to correlate like necessarily like the training experience with what you'll make as an analyst after. I have confidence that I'll be able to continue to live in this city and have the career and the life that I want. But it won't necessarily mean that I'm just like raking in the cash. But it really feels like this is my life and this is how I want to spend my time. And I just need money to make that all sustainable. So that's just a personal perspective, but it's really come out of like learning about myself and also not being scared about like learning the things that I don't know and that I need to understand to make my life feel like aligned with my values and the kind of experience that I want. But yeah, this doesn't feel so much like graduate school, I'd say, as just like part of my career, my day-to-day life.
And you learned that like kind of on your own.
Yeah,
there's no formal business advising.
Yeah.
However, developing a relationship with a SPSI consultant, a therapist who's a consultant, right as soon as possible, even if you don't necessarily have a control case, a formal control case going, finding someone is really invaluable. In addition to your own analysts, in addition to instructors, this person is someone who you pay to meet with, talk about cases, but can also should be able to talk about some of these practical business things too. And that is a really good venue for that. And with an analytic frame, because the analytic frame incorporates just about everything.
My other question is about diversity. Comments on how it is currently changing, both within the cohort, faculty, readings.
Probably I'll speak to that.
If you could repeat the question, that would be helpful.
The question was initiatives about diversity, DEI, and what it's like currently, and what initiatives is that in the future. It's a work in progress. I think that's but there's a lot of effort and care and concern for continuing to progress.
And I think that Liz had a question, had her hand up online.
Okay. So I'll answer this, and then we'll answer. So I think, or Liz, do you want to answer?
No, yeah, Taryn, why don't you go ahead first?
So I think in terms of, recruitment, like we're trying to reach out to more diverse spaces than we have before. In the future, we would like to have more connections with like community spaces to kind of bring in a more diverse cohort. In terms of faculty, I think also the way faculty works is, people who graduate from SPSI become faculty. So it kind of starts, at our roots. And that's definitely something that SPSI has been talking about and trying to implement. But it does take time. I think in terms of, there's, ethnic diversity, but also like diversity of like background and experience. And I think of my cohort, I see that come through in, the like Jesse did theater, like Dave, did ballet. Like there's like a range of places that people come from that really enrich our experiences. And then also, I think, there's this sort of the Combs Mission Report, that's for like the psychoanalytic community at large, nationally, to start thinking more about diversity. I mean, it's like to go through it. So it's definitely a part of the, it's in the air. It's like becoming something that we're starting to like breathe.
And Neelam online had raised her hand.
Hi everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I'm Neelam. Nice to meet you guys. I want to start off by saying happy Diwali for Hindus, and today's a day that we celebrate goodness and light winning over darkness and evil. And that's pretty cool for diversity too. So I wanted to just pipe in that I am one of the co-leaders for the collective grant. Suradant is also our trailblazer and also director too. And the collective grant was born from the idea of including into our in psychoanalysis. We fundraise, and with the fundraising gathered from the community at large, we're able to help subsidize cases, especially if they're people of color or who have been marginalized in other ways, such as gender, poverty, multiple other aspects. And we subsidize, oftentimes people who have been marginalized don't have money for analysis. Although we believe that everyone have access to it. So what we do is we pay the psychoanalyst a subsidized rate that will help to hopefully offset some of the cost. We've also helped with tuition reimbursement. So there's many ways in which we hope to integrate this experience of allowing peace with diversity, equity, and inclusion to be more of a solid foundational aspect in SPSI. I've seen it happen in my time here. By the way, I'm also like a few cohorts ahead. I haven't graduated yet, but I post-didactic. And I feel very supportive. I still feel very supported by our community. I feel as if it is something that is being taken seriously. And I think that it is something that I am proud of, because they're hard conversations to have, and we have them. We are the highest echelon of psychological thought, I think, in our community. And it really shows when it comes to tackling some really hard issues like this. So I wanted to just add that in there. Sue, did you want to add something else? I think it would be helpful also if you wanted to just chime in.
Thanks, Neelam. I think you covered it all, and happy Diwali.
Janet,
I think Liz also, Liz still had her hand up as well.
Yeah, you want to go, Liz?
Sure, yeah. So I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is, and they're related. So I can speak a little bit more to the diversity piece as well. I'm the current chair of the diversity committee here. And we've been trying to tackle diversity from quite a few fronts, and the admissions committee and recruitment, curriculum, which involves trying to switch from just adding on readings from diverse authors as a supplement, but trying to get that more into the core of the curriculum. We're talking about racialized enactments that happen within our community at SPSI. There's the collective grant. There are all these different fronts. And sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Liz Jordan. I'm a newer faculty here. I started training about 10 years ago now. So So, and I also wanted to mention that as people have talked about the financial piece and have asked about finding your own training analyst, I think there is a fair amount of diversity within the group of candidates and faculty at SPSI. So some of us do take insurance. I think it might be a little easier for some psychiatrists to get reimbursed. Okay, taking insurance as opposed to some of the other therapists. But there are a number of especially psychiatrists and other people too, non-psychiatrist therapists at SPSI who do take insurance. Some training analysts try to keep time for candidates. So if you're in the community, you might have trouble finding an analyst, but if you do analytic training, it might be that more doors are open to you. I know I personally have found that I've had some people who I've billed insurance 4 times a week for, some people who have 0 copays, or low copay. So it does, everybody deals with this differently. There's always conflict about taking insurance or not. But there are some people don't take insurance, but take on low fee cases, either candidates or not candidates, in order to try to see lower socioeconomic status people. So I just wanted to mention that.
Any other questions coming up?
Does the preponderance of candidates have a well-established private practice when they begin the training?
I think it varies. At least in our cohort, I think it varied. I didn't have like an established private practice when I started because I had graduated and then started. So when I started, I was still working at a university counseling center. And then as I got more confident, I left my private practice. I left the university counseling center and started the private practice, which, being a part of the community, was helpful in doing that. And now I've had the same patients more or less since then up until now.
I think it's a mix in our cohort also. I think we have someone who's right out of medical school, was just getting started in private practice. I have a full private practice. I think
it's like the majority of, there's probably a fourth of us that don't have a private practice.
Yeah, or just getting started in some way.
But 6 of us do.
Yeah.
Or doing 2 things, private practice and something else.
Do you guys have specific populations that you all serve, or do you all consider yourself generalists in the populations that you like to work with?
Well, we're psychoanalytic, so that's the specialty, and it tends to be not so much like age or identity or like a category of problem, because psychoanalytic thinking has like a developmental component to it. So looking at issues that are like kind of human issues that have maybe established like early in life character organization, and thinking about how people's problems are maybe symptoms of other things. We might have like a tendency to draw a certain type of client or patient to our practices, and maybe have some affinity because we have previous experience. So a lot of us have worked in other, have had a practice for a while, or our training has sort of given us affinity for working with certain populations. But I think that most of us have sort of a range. We treat like a wide variety of identity, problems that come up in like a wide variety of people, across like sort of a socioeconomic and like identity category, because the specialization is the approach, the theory.
I would also add for me, I probably work with like half adults, half adolescents, and all psychodynamic or analytically depending on the frequency.
I love both of your answers. What's analytic is in the approach and in the relationship that's created. I think for what it's worth, I think if you choose to specialize, I think that can be helped by working analytically. Like when I started training, most of my background and most of my patients were people with HIV. Still about a quarter of my caseload. I also happen to really love working with people with borderline personality. So those are sort of kind of areas of specialty. My husband is also an analyst, and he works primarily with people with addictions. So I think it is possible to specialize while having the kind of breadth and depth that thinking analytically offers.
I'll say I don't necessarily specialize in this, but the majority of the patients I work with are in the LGBTQ community, and that's part of my background. But I think that's something actually that is changing, as not their sexuality isn't changing. But well, it may, I don't know. That varies. Yeah, you never know. It's all fluid. But I would say, like, the patients I'm working with, that is changing as I develop. I think something that's really wonderful and challenging about analytic training is there are all this like complexity of voices. Like I have my consultant, I have my analyst, I have instructors, I have my cohort, and that all informs, in some ways, the patients that I'm working with and the patients that I want to work with. And there are some patients I'm working with who I just worked with from community mental health who went with me to private practice. But that, like, if they were to call today, I might be like, yeah, I'm actually not the right therapist for you. So I would say I do have like a kind of population of people that is the majority of my practice, and it's also changing as I continue in analytic training.
I have to run, unfortunately, for nap time, but open to be contacted for questions. And I'll just add that obviously I wasn't in private practice starting, but then I have a mixed practice. I see folks for lots of different things: analytically oriented therapy, medication management, short-term therapy. And I think a lot of folks in our cohort also have mixed practices, and people do like weekend work in the hospital or different other jobs as well.
Thank you.
Does that get to your
Yeah, I think it was wanting to understand like where everyone comes from in their background and the kinds of client populations that we see that also leads to the case presentations that come as you're discussing. And sometimes a lot of people prefer to work with adults, and then that ends up being the dominant in the cohort. I know that like there is child development and everything as a part of the course. I primarily work with kids, and so I'm wanting to, like when I'm thinking about applying, I'm wondering if there will be other people like me, and just wanting to hear that.
Someone in our cohort.
Well, not only someone in our cohort, but a lot of the faculty do a lot of work with kids and adolescents too. So you wouldn't be alone.
And the person in our cohort who works with children in a community agency brings cases and contributes from their child cases on completely equal footing, if not more depth and more like sensitivity than to like the adult cases that could get presented. Again, because we're talking about like defenses and like communication and unconscious communication, and so that's a huge benefit to have somebody in a cohort that is working that's seeing children and bringing those cases and that material regularly.
Yeah, she's working with young children.
Yeah.
Young children, and then I was actually just recently in a very great case consult this past semester with someone who presented in adolescents, and it was really, really great. So, and I mostly entirely work with adults, mostly because I'm kind of scared of parents. So it was,
the problem is.
yeah, so it was really, really great for me to hear about Taryn's patient and her work with the family. You know, I really didn't.
I'm glad you brought up, adolescents and children, because I probably have found such, I think, rich mentorship between like the faculty and other people at SPSI who work with children. I did not anticipate wanting to work with adolescents or children, but for me that like changed through relationship with other faculty here, where I got to learn more about like how they work with kids and how how you do that analytically, and it became like a huge part of my training. So if anyone wants to talk more about that and like people, I can direct them to.
I am just curious. I think listening to everyone talk, I have a lot of questions between the 2-year and the 4-year program. And so I think I'm more just wondering who I should talk to afterwards, or if that is like now is an appropriate time to talk about just the admissions differences, the community differences, but just wanted to name that and maybe be pointed in the right direction.
Well, maybe now would be a good time to have Karen speak a little bit. She's the chair of the 2-year program, and then calling our attention to the time. At some point in the next, if we have another question or two, where we should transition towards being able to speak amongst ourselves, get some food, socialize, and of course then walk hopefully with contacts that you can reach out to in order to make sure your questions that are going to come up over the next month or two are answered, and you feel very much that you have somebody to reach out to.
Thanks, Michael. So I'm Karen Weisbard. I'm chair of the 2-year program as well as on the faculty at SPSI. So I think, as Rye already said, while highly encouraged to be in your own treatment, whether analysis or in-depth psychotherapy, and have a consultant on your cases, it's not a requirement. And so it does free up your financial resources to sort of more or less just do the didactic. It is on Monday nights, covers all the range of theories. But one thing that I think we're pretty proud of in the 2-year program is we're really trying to speak to the social applicability of psychoanalysis. And I sort of hear in the room, one of the criticisms of psychoanalysis by the elite profession, and only people who can afford to pay can benefit. And in the 2-year program, we're really, and in the SPSI community too, really trying to think more broadly about the social applicability of psychoanalysis, but also how to make the work that we do in our offices available to a much more diverse population. So some of the classes that we offer that aren't yet offered in the 4-year curriculum, but I think highly interested is groups, thinking about group identity and identity formation and how groups of people relate to other groups of people. And so we have 2 courses on that, one at the very beginning of your 2-year program and one at the very end. And what else would I say about the 2-year?
Well, you should let them know there's going to be a 2-year program
thanks.
open
Yeah,
house.
so our application process is a bit different. So after this open house, we're going to schedule the next sort of thinking about when will our open house be specific just to the 2-year program, and then what will be the admission cycle. It might not be quite along the lines of this one, just because May 1st, and you guys do a lot more interviews of candidates for the 4-year. We will have you fill out applications much simpler, and you'll also have a set of interviews probably with 2 people, 2 analysts, community, 2 instructors. But so it's not as intensive. So our deadline will probably be a little bit later, but currently we have, how many, Julie? So we have currently 11 people in their 2nd year, and Julie's here, she can talk to you if you're interested in her experience in the 2-year currently. And of course, I'm available too, and like I said, we'll be changing the information on the website sometime next weekend to have it all updated with all the deadlines. Yeah, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and I'm happy to chat with anybody about 2-year program. Yeah, I guess midway through the 2nd year right now.
I'm also happy to chat with you about differences.
Any other questions? Okay, so this concludes the panel portion. We have food, as well as this next part is really for us to mingle and ask questions and get to know each other more. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.